My name's Daniel Hartman, and for most of 3 years, I was just a laid-off IT guy working side jobs to support my wife while she chased her dream of becoming a surgeon. People at Glenview Hospital knew me as the quiet guy who stocked the cafeteria, vending machines, and fixed the printers. They didn't know I used to own a mid-sized tech firm that I sold for 7 figures before my 35th birthday. The money, locked-in assets, and a trust I set up after a bad fallout with my own family. I wanted a break from the world that only liked me when I had money. Even my ex-fiancée left the moment things got tough. So when I met Hannah during a minor ER visit and she was working a double shift, I didn't tell her about the trust or the business I'd sold. I just said I was in between careers. She didn't blink. She offered me a smile, a number, and later, a coffee date. Over time, she became my world. She said she loved that I was grounded, normal, and not flashy. I thought she really loved me for me. That was the point of hiding my finances. I wanted something real. When she started med school, I made sure she didn't have to worry about a thing. $1,100 a month for rent and living, $8,000 a term for tuition, and always told her she could count on me. So, when she finally graduated and invited me to the celebration her mom threw at a beachside private event hall in San Diego, I thought maybe this was the beginning of her accepting me as part of her world. I wore the only decent suit I owned, brought a nice bottle of wine, and tried to ignore the looks her family had always given me. That night, everything changed with 5 words. Words I'll never forget. At the party, I was standing near the bar, just about to refill someone's empty pitcher, when I heard her mom say, "That's the guy?" Her voice was flat, like she'd found gum stuck under her shoe. My blood froze. Before I could process what was happening, I saw Hannah. She leaned in, pointed straight at me, and said, clear as day, "He doesn't belong here." No hesitation, no warmth, just flat-out dismissal. In front of everybody. I couldn't move. The words didn't hit me like I thought they would. They just settled in. I felt a sting, but it wasn't from her words. It was from the look in her eyes. No surprise, no regret, just coldness. The security guard stepped forward, visibly uncomfortable but doing his job, probably wondering how to remove a guy without making a scene. He looked at me, then back at Hannah. I met his eyes but didn't speak. What was the point? I looked at Hannah one last time. She didn't flinch, didn't even acknowledge the hurt she just casually threw at me. Her mom, on the other hand, chuckled. Thought he was part of the family? Please. Her voice was loud enough for a few people nearby to hear, but I didn't even blink. I just nodded. Then I turned and walked out. No words, no fight. That wasn't the place. That wasn't my moment. The ride back to my studio apartment felt endless. The silence in the car pressed in on me like a weight, and the city lights blurred into streaks as I drove. But none of it really mattered. I didn't cry, didn't yell. I couldn't, not yet. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed. The cheap engagement ring I'd bought for her was still sitting there, in its box, on the nightstand. I'd planned to give it to her after graduation. It wasn't much, a simple band, nothing fancy, but it felt right at the time. I didn't care about the money, though. I'd never cared about that. What stung was the lie, the realization that everything I thought we had was a front. She wasn't looking for something real. She was looking for a stepping stone, and for whatever reason, I'd been it. I sat there, staring at that ring. What had I been thinking? That she'd love me for who I was? That we'd make it through together? No, she'd never really cared. Not the way I thought. It wasn't just the way her mom spoke to me, or the way Hannah had dismissed me without a second thought. It was everything. All the times I'd put her needs first, taken care of her bills, made sure she didn't have to worry about anything while she focused on school. And for what? So she could treat me like I didn't even matter when it was time for her to step into the world she really wanted? I wasn't some guy to be thrown away when I was no longer useful. And if she thought I was, then she had no idea who she was dealing with. So I made a plan. But it wasn't a plan to confront her. I wasn't going to go back to that party and make a scene. No, I was done with that. I wasn't going to beg for answers or demand apologies. I wasn't the one who needed to explain myself. What I needed was exposure. I needed her to know that everything she thought was hidden was already laid bare. And I would make sure everyone else knew it too. I returned to the life I'd kept deliberately on pause. My car in a separate garage, my condo in La Jolla, the identity I'd tucked away. I stopped living under the modest cover story I'd created for peace and anonymity. For the first time in a while, I felt like myself again. I called my estate manager, reactivated a few dormant accounts, and checked the trust holdings. Everything was still in place. Hannah had never known I'd been living off an intentionally limited cash flow while managing passive investments through a private fund. She'd never suspected a thing. Monday morning, I showed up at work like usual, a small IT contractor gig in the hospital basement. No one noticed anything. Perfect. I could blend back into this life, no questions asked. The quiet guy who fixed printers and stocked vending machines. That's who they saw. That's who I wanted them to see. But this time, I wasn't just biding my time. I had a plan. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet, but I was going to find out exactly who she was behind that smile. I used my network to hire a private investigator. The guy I'd worked with before was thorough, quiet, professional. I gave him all the details I could. Hannah's school, her schedule, known contacts. I made it clear. I'm not looking for dirt, I told him. Just the truth. What he came back with hit me harder than I expected. Multiple hotel visits logged under her name, ones I didn't even know about. Credit card usage in places she'd sworn she'd never go. And photos. There she was, always the same guy, Dr. Eric Talbot, her classmate, her study partner. They were more than that. It was clear in the photos, the way he touched her arm, the way they laughed together. The guy was a walking upgrade. She'd been dating up while I quietly paid her tuition, covered her grocery bills, and supported her dream of becoming a surgeon. I guess I didn't fit the image she was going for. I wasn't flashy enough. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the evidence in front of me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the realization that all the years I had spent helping her weren't for love. They were for a plan, a stepping stone. I wasn't special. I was just another useful guy who had outlived his usefulness. That's when I reached out to another guy I hadn't spoken to in a while, Mark, Hannah's ex. I found him on LinkedIn and shot him a message. Got a minute? He responded within an hour. Sure. When and where? We met at a diner the next night. It wasn't a place I'd usually go, but the greasy booths and stale coffee felt like the right backdrop. Mark was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner booth. He looked different, older, more worn down, but the bitterness in his eyes was the same. You're the guy she's with now? He asked when I slid into the booth. Was, I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. He snorted, shaking his head. She got you too, huh? There was a rueful edge to his voice, like he'd already seen this play. We talked for a while, each of us sharing our stories, comparing notes. He pulled out his phone and showed me screenshots of old texts Hannah had sent him. They were eerily similar to the ones she'd sent me over the years. The same lines. You're the only one who gets me. I just want something real. The words sounded empty now, hollow, just part of the script she ran on repeat. Mark wasn't the only one. He told me how he'd paid off one of her semesters when she claimed her financial aid had fallen through. He wasn't the first either. She'd hit him up for money multiple times, always with a sob story. Did you know Derek helped her out too? Mark asked. Back when she was prepping for the MCAT, I didn't. But I wasn't surprised. It was the same game, different targets. I realized then that I wasn't even special. I was just the latest in a long line of men she'd used to get where she wanted to go. I sat back, trying to hold on to some shred of dignity, but it was slipping. What do you think? I asked, the question feeling useless even as I asked it. Mark shrugged. She plays the game, man. You're just another pawn. Don't let it get to you. It stung, but he wasn't wrong, and that's when it hit me. Hannah wasn't some misunderstood, hard-working med student. She was a predator, using whoever she needed to get ahead. I took a deep breath and texted the PI. I needed more. Look into Eric. I want to know what he does, where he works, who his dad plays golf with. Leave no stone unturned. I wasn't going to let her have her happy ending. Not if I could help it. As I sat there, Mark picked up his coffee, his fingers wrapped around the mug. What are you going to do with all this? He asked, his voice soft but sharp with curiosity. I didn't have a clear answer yet, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to make sure everyone saw her for who she really was, and I wasn't going to stop until they did. It wasn't just her that made me snap. It was the journal. Yeah, Hannah kept one. Left it open in her office one day when I stopped by to drop off her dry cleaning. I remember standing there, holding the bag of clothes, staring at the open pages. the neat handwriting, the bullet points. My gut twisted. Something inside me snapped. This wasn't a diary about hopes or dreams. It was a fucking plan. A business proposal. I didn't want to look, but I did. I couldn't help myself. I pulled out my phone and took the pictures of every page. Not just one or two, all of it. Her entire financial strategy, right there in front of me. A plan for how she was going to use people like they were assets, each one with a clear expiration date. I wasn't some guy she loved. I was a line item in her game. That night, I reviewed the pictures with Mark over beers. His face grew darker as he looked through the notes. There were names, his name, my name, even Derek's. The dates lined up perfectly with when she'd started showing more interest in Eric, her new study partner. She'd estimated how long each of us could last before we were no longer useful to her. When I saw the calculations, I felt like the last few years of my life had been erased, like I'd been played from the beginning. We were never people to her. We were just stepping stones. Mark slammed his beer down with a disgusted grunt. She really had this all mapped out, huh? I just nodded, my anger simmering beneath the surface. This was no longer about being heartbroken or betrayed. It was about being used, manipulated. Like I didn't even matter. That's when the anger cooled, because I realized something. Now I had proof. Not just some broken heart or a few suspicious texts. I had hard evidence. I didn't waste any time. I called a lawyer the next morning, told her everything, about the journal, about the pattern I'd uncovered. I had to. I wasn't just going to sit back and let her keep playing people. You said something about non-marital fraud, I told her, pacing my small apartment as I spoke. Is that something we could pursue? She was quiet for a second, probably weighing whether it was worth her time. It's not often pursued, she said finally, but if the pattern's clear and money's traceable, we can build a case. The financials would be key. I could feel a fire burning in my chest as I heard her words. There it was, a real shot at doing something about this, at making sure no one else got caught in her web. You'll need to prove that she's been using people's money and manipulating them for personal gain, the lawyer said. We can do that if we tie everything together, but we'll need time, and we'll need to get more information. More information. I could already feel the pieces falling into place. I had everything I needed. It wasn't just about exposing her to Mark or Derek. It was about exposing her to the world. I wasn't going to let her get away with this anymore. Not this time. I hung up the phone and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. This wasn't just going to be a quiet, painful memory. I was going to make sure the truth came out. And when it did, it wasn't going to be me left standing in the shadows anymore. Hannah's residency acceptance was coming up. Her mom was throwing another party. This time, it was at a rooftop restaurant downtown. She didn't invite me. Of course she didn't. But I already had a table reserved, courtesy of the restaurant manager, who happened to be one of my private fund's former tenants. I had it all planned out. I wasn't going to show up like some angry ex making a scene. That wasn't my style. No, this was something different. I wasn't crashing the party. I was just going to observe. I had Derek and Mark meet me there, both of them in suits. I wore mine too. We looked the part. It felt strange, almost like we were actors in a play waiting for the curtain to rise. As soon as we walked in, I spotted her. Hannah, in a long, glittering dress, working the crowd like a senator on election night, laughing, smiling, sipping champagne. The whole room was wrapped around her finger. And there, right beside her, was Eric, her new study partner, the one she'd told me was arrogant and not her type. Yet here they were, attached at the hip, all smiles. The same guy she'd sworn off, the one she'd cried about to me months ago. I watched them for a while. It was almost sickening how easily she slid into her role as the center of attention. She didn't notice us at first, didn't even glance our way. But then, as she passed near our table, I stood up. Casual but steady. Hannah, I said, my voice light but firm. She froze, just for a second. I saw her eyes widen, then narrow as she recognized me. Her face didn't change, but I saw her lips tighten. Nice venue, I added, like I was making small talk. Who paid this time? Her expression faltered for a moment, and I could see the confusion flicker in her eyes. She sputtered something, words I didn't catch. It didn't matter. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small manila envelope, handing it to her without another word. You'll want to open this later, I said, my tone smooth. Alone. I watched her fingers tremble as she took it, trying to mask it behind a forced smile. But I didn't care about her reaction. I'd already done what I needed to do. The damage was done. I turned and walked back to my seat without waiting for her to say anything else. Derek and Mark followed me, both of them watching the scene unfold in silence. We didn't need to say anything. The point had been made. A few minutes later, I saw Hannah's eyes shift toward the envelope in her hands. Her gaze flickered between it and the people around her. She didn't open it right away, but I could see her brain working, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Inside the envelope was the photocopy of her journal's summary page, the one that laid out the entire plan, the one that had my name, Mark's name, and Derek's. Each of us assigned a time frame. Each of us noted as an asset, a resource to be used until we demanded something more than she was willing to give, and beneath it, I had left her a note, a small one, simple, but cutting. You may want to stop taking money from people you underestimate. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about exposure. She'd spent so long pretending to be something she wasn't, using people like pawns in her game. But tonight, in front of all those people, I was pulling back the curtain. I didn't need her to acknowledge me. I didn't need her to cry or apologize. What mattered was that she knew I had the truth. And once that truth came out, there was no way for her to play this game anymore. No more pretending. No more lies. I leaned back in my chair, watching her carefully. She still hadn't opened the envelope, but she would, eventually. And when she did, I wanted to be there. I wanted to be the one she remembered when everything started to fall apart. 2 days later, I got a voicemail. "You had no right." I hit delete before she even finished. I wasn't going to let her drag me into another round of her games. There was nothing left to say. The real work had already begun. My lawyer sent her a notice. Polite, but clear. Mark, Derek, and I were pursuing civil recovery under fraud and misrepresentation. I wasn't expecting her to respond to the legal jargon. She would have known what it meant, though. She wasn't dumb. But I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for myself, for everyone who'd ever been played by her, left behind when she was done. The wheels started turning quickly after that, quietly, but swiftly. That same week, Eric's dad, a hospital board member, received an anonymous email. "Concerned party," it said in the most innocent way possible. Nothing too direct, nothing too dramatic. Just a little nudge, a quiet whisper about his son's romantic entanglements with a now legally questionable candidate. I could almost hear Eric's dad cursing under his breath when he read that. I'd bet anything that he was already scrambling to put out the fire before it spread. But I didn't stop there. I didn't need to. I didn't show up to Hannah's disciplinary hearing. Didn't need to. It was a public humiliation waiting to happen, and I wasn't going to be the one standing there, throwing the first stone. I just sat back and watched the fallout from a safe distance. Her residency offer was rescinded. It wasn't a headline. It wasn't a grand public spectacle. It was quiet, methodical. Like someone had quietly plucked the rug out from under her feet, and she didn't know why she was suddenly falling. But that's the way I wanted it. There were no fireworks, no dramatic confrontations, no emotional moments where I finally told her everything I was feeling. This wasn't about me. It was about what was fair, what she deserved. I didn't need to see her face when it happened. Her mom's real estate business took a hit too. And just like that, everything she thought she could rely on, everything she'd worked so hard to manipulate, started to crumble. Slowly, quietly, no big reveals, no explosive confrontations. Just the gradual and complete dismantling of the world she had built on lies. It wasn't personal, really. It was just business. Cold, calculated, clean. The kind of thing she should have seen coming, but never did. I knew she'd eventually try to reach out. I wasn't worried about that. When it happened, I'd be long gone. Just another shadow in her rearview mirror. What mattered was that she knew. She knew I'd seen her for what she was. She knew I'd turned the tables on her, and there was nothing she could do about it. 3 months later, I was back at Glenview Hospital, this time not to fix a printer, but as a guest of the new chief of operations, a college buddy of mine who'd invited me to the hospital's annual gala. I showed up in a sharp navy suit, a new watch, and with a woman named Claire, a financial planner I'd met through my real life. She had a way about her, calm, confident, the kind of woman who didn't need to be the center of attention to command it. The room was packed, all the usual players mingling, talking shop, handing out business cards like candy. I felt a little out of place at first, but the longer I stood there, the more natural it felt. Across the room, I spotted her, Hannah. She was sitting with her mom near the exit, looking like she couldn't get out of there fast enough. She wasn't in scrubs or heels this time, just a plain dress trying to blend in with the crowd, the way she'd always wanted me to. She looked different, tired maybe. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she saw me. I didn't wave, I didn't approach, I didn't need to. I just walked past her with Claire on my arm, heading toward the table up front. As we passed, I heard her mom hiss, "That guy? Why is he here?" The words cut through the noise of the room like a knife, loud enough for me to hear, but not quite loud enough for anyone else to catch. And I smiled, because that's when the irony hit full circle. "She doesn't belong here," her mom had said, but I did. I was exactly where I needed to be. It was her that didn't belong. Hannah's eyes flickered between me and Claire, but she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. We were worlds apart now, and she knew it. I didn't feel any anger anymore, just a cold kind of satisfaction. I had what I came for. Everything was different. I was different. No more pretending. No more playing the role she wanted me to play. I was exactly who I was supposed to be, and I wasn't going anywhere. I sat down at the table, Claire next to me. The conversation flowed around us, but all I could think about was how far we'd come since that night, since I'd watched her get comfortable in her lies. She might have been sitting with her mom, looking like she had it all together, but the truth was, she'd never had control. Not over me, not over anything. I glanced over at her once more, and this time, she didn't look away. Maybe she was wondering who I'd become, or maybe she was just seeing for the first time that I didn't need her to validate me anymore. But whatever it was, I didn't care. I had my life now, the one I'd built. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I was meant to be.